This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA.
Welcome, everybody. You are tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Speaking of hot, I mean, it is so weltering right now. Midsummer's, like, it's just crazy right now. A lot of basketball out there on the courts, but man, I encourage everybody to stay cool. And what better way to stay cool than to be listening to your favorite NBA podcast? And of course, man, some great things happening, and unfortunately, some unfortunate things happening, like a great player in the game of basketball finally hanging up the Nikes, the Converses, the Reeboks. He's hanging them up. He's done. Tim Duncan finally walking away from the game. And of course, you know, we got to kind of enlighten y'all about what we feel about the greatest power forward to ever play this game. Of course, in order to do that, I got to do it with my right-hand man, 50 grand NBA aficionado, dime man, contributor, writer for one of the illest websites, www.shawsports.net. Big Kahuna and PNC, my brother from another mother, Mr. Warren Shaw, repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Holla back at me, Mr. Shaw. You got that climate cool wrapped around your neck right now from this July heat hitting you?
July is absolutely whooping my butt, man. It is
John
so
Blaze, boy. John Blaze.
Not a game out here in South Florida, but it's still great. You know, just to be alive and continue to do this show with you, and salute to all the fans and listeners of the NBA Baseline podcast. We are so excited to be with you and talking about some of the great topics that we have on this week's show. And obviously, you know, not bearing the lead at all, Tim Duncan is obviously the main focus. I gotta admit, I was a little weary and teary-eyed when I heard the news, more so than I thought I'd be, simply because, you know, I think that you're gonna find out is, you know, we are some older guys on this show, and nostalgia definitely reigns for us, and seeing one of the all-time greats hang them up was definitely something for me that I don't think I was quite ready for.
Yeah, I don't think anyone was quite ready for this, and I think the most important thing that we have to take into consideration is what Tim Duncan represented in the transition of where the NBA trended towards. And you look at all of the numbers and the accomplishments, a lot of what we'll probably be discussing when we have Jabari Young, who he does a phenomenal job covering the Spurs. You can find him at Jabari J. Young. He writes for the San Antonio Express News and my SA. We'll have him on shortly to help us talk about the greatness of Tim Duncan and what he's meant not just to the game, but also to he himself as a writer who is covering the NBA basketball in the short amount of time that he's had with them. And then also later on, we got our man Jack Perkins. He is a basketball painter, t-shirt maker, all-around great guy. He's going to help bring a little bit of nostalgia to us and kind of talk about the phenomenon on the crossover culture that is NBA and art, and where these two have flourished and will plan to flourish in years to come. Man, it's just great to have two awesome guests on our show this week, Shaw, to help bring about some great things that we don't often get to talk about with regards to the NBA.
Now, again, like you said, we're really going to touch it up, and can't wait to jump right in, my dude.
Most definitely, Shaw. So once again, we'd like to thank you and yours for tuning into the Baseline NBA podcast. Be sure to get at my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA, or get at me at GameFace Lee. But we always encourage you to get at the show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline. Hashtag up the Baseline. Let us know who you are and what you're about. Available on all the major platforms. Available on iTunes, Stitcher, Microsoft TuneIn, and also iTunes. So be sure to download any one of those platforms. They're also available on Google Music. And then you could also check out the Baseline NBA podcast on Roku. So if you have a Roku box, be sure to go to Shaw Sports. He's shawsports.net or Shaw Sports. The channel is there. The Baseline NBA podcast is available, so you can catch all of our podcasts and the previous episodes from before while we discuss the things happening in the association. Now, one thing we want to make sure that you and yours is fully in tune with as you prepare yourself for the 2016-2017 NBA season is making sure that you have your favorite NBA gear on hand, ready and waiting as the season starts to tip off. So how would you like to get all of your favorite NBA teams merchandise delivered straight to your doorstep? You got to check out fanessentials.net. All you do is subscribe and pick your team, and every month you'll get your team's gear shipped right to your door. They find the best sports gear so you don't have to. Each fan box comes packed with some amazing gear. It makes a great gift idea for any sports fan. Prices start at $14.99, go up to $34.99. So be sure to visit fanessentials.net. Use the promo code BASELINE at checkout for 30% off of your first month. Visit fanessentials.net to get all of the essentials you need to prepare yourself for the upcoming NBA season. Now, as we get you ready for the breakdown and our man Jabari Young, we also want to keep everybody plugged in to one of the other hottest NBA podcasts happening. That's our boys doing their thing at the Drive and Dish podcast. If you don't know who they are and what they are about, you guys be sure to check them out. And maybe it's best that we let you know what the Drive and Dish podcast is all about. So be sure to check these guys out. And once that happens, we'll get you set for the breakdown with our interview with Jabari Young.
So we interrupt this great podcast that you're listening to. My name is Kevin Rayfuse.
I'm Tim Tompkins.
And I'm Justin Kuzart.
And we host the Drive and Dish NBA podcast.
We cover every team in the league and a bunch of really fun segments like Random NBA Player, Drive and Dougal, and Hot Takes from Reddit.
So when you're done listening to this podcast, give us a search on iTunes or whatever podcast streaming app you're listening on.
We're also at driveanddishpodcast.com. We are the Drive and Dish NBA podcast.
Time to break it down to the bone gristle. Time now for the breakdown. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw of the Baseline NBA podcast. And for those who obviously, if you didn't already hear the announcement, you've probably been sleeping under a rock for too long. But one of the greats of the game has decided to call it quits. And I consider him one of the greats because of basically just what he brings to the table. So there's no question that while he has one of the greatest nicknames I think the game will ever have, maybe for these young kids, they need to adopt this as in their everyday lessons. The great Tim Duncan, a.k.a. the Big Fundamentals, he has decided to call it a wraps with San Antonio. And what better way for us to be able to kind of think back and look at the career and the legacy that this man has laid forth than by having really one of the more profound and really up and coming writers who's been basically on top of it since day one, practically. Jabari Young, you can find him with the San Antonio Express News. He's on Twitter at Jabari J. Young. Jabari, thanks for joining us and really kind of celebrating the greatness of probably one of the best power forwards in the game of basketball that we'll ever know.
Thanks, guys, for having me on. I really appreciate it. You guys do a good job. And, you hit it right on the money. Tim Duncan is definitely, he's going to go down as arguably the best power forward, that the NBA has produced up until this point. It's been knocked off Kevin McHale for that power forward position. And, it's a time for celebration, man. As one of the greats is leaving the game, but you have so many memories about him that's going to last forever. And I think that's the important thing.
Jabari, I'm not even going to waste any time with this and I was talking about this with my man Shaw off the air before we jumped on. And I feel like the NBA in some small way has really done a disservice to what Tim Duncan truly has accomplished and fairly. When I say this, because he came in at a time where the NBA transitioned in polarizing the greatness of what an individual talents can do. Like everybody was completely enamored with the Jordan era. I get that. And they were looking for the next Jordan era. So we slide in and we start looking at guys like Kobe and then we see the LeBron James. But quietly under the radar, here is a guy who basically has done all of the things that when you look at today's modern NBA, coaches are begging, they are pleading for these young kids to actually adopt in their game, to be able to maintain a level of success that Tim Duncan has been able to do. And I don't know whether or not you may feel in that particular manner, but when you stack the numbers up, I look at it and I say to myself, man, Tim Duncan should be heralded on a much higher pedestal in this era than I think we've ever given him that much credit for.
Well, I can't say that it's the NBA's fault that, Tim Duncan isn't looked upon in that light. I mean, you're right. When we talk about when Kobe retired, we always, we made a big thing about it. And obviously ESPN and all the, they went and did his last game. But that's Kobe. He loved the spotlight. And I think, Tim Duncan would not have it any other way than the way it went down for his career, doing it so well, doing it under the radar. And that's just the way he wanted it. I think there's probably been times and times where the NBA has probably wanted to pump Tim Duncan up even more, but, he just didn't want to do it. I think obviously we all know, the people who look at basketball, the people who follow the sport at a closer level, what Tim Duncan has meant to the NBA. We look at the numbers and we say, man, he's going to definitely go down as one of the top to do it. 5 NBA championships, 15 All-Star appearances, 1 All-Star MVP, 2 MVPs in the league, 3 NBA Finals MVPs. I mean, the list can go on and on and on, numbers and statistic-wise, but, the way he went about doing it, he was humble with it. He didn't want the attention. He just wanted to come, play basketball, win at a high level, go home to his kids, go home to his family, and that's the way he came in, and that's the way he went out. And like I said, I don't think the NBA is personally responsible for not maybe him being looked upon in that light. I just think that that's just the way he wanted it, and he got what he got. And when you think about, like I said, the greats that ever played this game, no matter if Tim Duncan was popular in his time or not, he's going to go down as the greatest power forward to play as of right now because of what he's done and all that he's accomplished. So the people that in the basketball world certainly know about Tim Duncan, certainly respect Tim Duncan, certainly put Tim Duncan on that pedestal, even if the public hasn't done it. Because San Antonio isn't necessarily the top market. It's not one of the top tier places, big city wise as far as all the NBA has to offer. But at the same time, in the last 19 years, 5 of those times they were the last team standing. That's because of Tim Duncan, and he'll go down. Believe me, he will not be forgotten. First Hall of Fame ballot. Once his name is up for it, he'll get right in, no questions asked. But like I said, he's definitely one as arguably the greatest power forward based off of all that he's accomplished, even if it's not that Kobe level.
So consistent throughout his career, and I've had a chance to watch him for a very long time. I'm in my late 30s. It's kind of been the theme of our show here. We were talking about nostalgia and a lot of great things that we've seen over the course of the years we were watching basketball. And for those of us, of all the games and places that I've been, I've never actually had an opportunity to go to San Antonio and see the Spurs play there. I've seen the Spurs play in other cities, but can you properly articulate, for the rest of us, what Duncan means to that city per se? Because yes, he didn't get the national spotlight per se on a regular basis, but within that city of San Antonio, just really how beloved is Tim Duncan and what he's meant to the Spurs community, the San Antonio community over the course of his playing career?
Man, he's a basketball god down here. I mean, before Tim Duncan, it was obviously George Gervin and David Robinson had put their place and left their mark on the city. Now it's going to be Tim Duncan. And then when Tony Parker, Miles Ginobili go, it may not be to that level of Tim Duncan, but there'll be guys as well. So, they praise him down here. Obviously they're going to miss him. But the man has brought them 5 championships. So if there's any body that's going to get a statue in front of the AT&T Center where the Spurs play at down in San Antonio, it's probably going to be Tim Duncan first. Maybe him and David Robinson are the 2 twin towers. But he's definitely the guy down here in San Antonio. And they're going to, like I said, when you walk right around the city, you see the signs. We love Tim Duncan forever, love number 21. He'll get that praise for the rest of his life and beyond. But listen, San Antonio would not be on the basketball map in today's conversation had it not been for Tim Duncan. So, he gets mad respect down here. They love him. They'll always love him when he comes to games. If he ever does come to games and they show him on the big screen, he'll get a loud ovation. When his number gets retired, he'll get a loud ovation. When that moment comes, but he'll go down as one of the best to do it that ever played in San Antonio. So listen, Tim Duncan has a key to the city as far as I'm concerned. Even if it's not official, this man is he walks on solid ground now. Any restaurant he goes into, I'm sure people will pick up the tab where the restaurant says, "Don't even worry about it. Go ahead." He's big, and he's always going to be.
Jabari Young joining us here. Be sure to check him out on Twitter at Jabari J. Young. It's interesting, Jabari, especially when you look at this past offseason with free agency and with what happened to Kevin Durant and the decision that Kevin Durant had to make leaving OKC, and really leaving the franchise, the quote unquote Seattle Supersonics / Oklahoma City Thunder. And we talk about how Presti in his press conference had illustrated how Durant was the foundation, for the future, so to speak, of where OKC is going to be and things of that nature. And I think back to myself and say, man, what would happen if this type of crossroads ever came to Tim Duncan and his thought process about where he would want to be? And it kind of speaks so much more about how in tune, we don't give credit behind the scenes about how Tim Duncan was in tune with this organization and the things that he had to sacrifice and the things that he had to do to keep this machine that's running that we talk about with the San Antonio Spurs. Can you kind of enlighten people on those type of sacrifices that Tim Duncan has made to make it such a point where we have this contrast now where athletes can easily make these type of decisions to say, after 9 years of the work I put in, I want to go somewhere else and try to go win me a championship. And you have someone like here, Tim Duncan, say, I'm going to stay with the organization that is taking care of me, and I'm going to do what I can to take care of them.
Well, to answer, your question, listen, Tim Duncan and Kobe Bryant, obviously 20 years for Kobe to 19 for Tim. I mean, we love the fact that they were able to stay with with their organization and do it like the Michael Jordans and like the other, greats did. But don't forget, Tim almost walked away from the Spurs in 2000 when he almost signed with the Orlando Magic. There was, internal things going on. And I wasn't here, at that time, but based off of people that I've talked to about that, time frame, where Tim almost walked away, the Spurs had to do some things too, and they had to obviously get their act together to make sure that Tim was in the fold because he was very close to leaving. And it's a hard thing to do. The window for basketball, the window for people's careers are short. It doesn't even feel like it, but Kevin Durant's been in the league 10 years now. So, it's very short, and guys want to win and they want to also make sure that they're happy when doing so. And it's easy to point the finger and say, hey, this guy's leaving and look at Tim Duncan, he stayed forever and Kobe stayed forever. But, it's not as easy, nowadays. Back then, obviously, like I said, Tim was almost ready to walk away, but he stayed. He took less money to stay.
Oh, yeah, no, I completely agree with you.
Sacrifice.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Jabari. And I think that was kind of part of the point that I was making as well, too. Like, everybody is getting on top of Kevin Durant right now. And we don't talk about that. Durant made sacrifices, much the same that Tim Duncan has made these type of sacrifices. And Kevin Durant is on his way to posting Hall of Fame type numbers as well. And behind the scenes, both of these premier players had to make sacrifices at certain points in their career. And the organizations had to do the same in order to keep this moving. And it's just interesting because we really don't talk about those things. We tend to stick so much to the numbers and we tend to stick to the loyalty factor, but there are those things that do take shape. And it would have been a lot harder, especially for Tim Duncan at that time frame because of all the craziness that was going on with the collective bargaining agreement and things that were happening between the players and the players union and things of that nature.
Yeah, and listen, let's suppose the Spurs wouldn't have won the championship back in 1999. Would he would have stayed then? Remember they already had won the championship, so he was, kind of making a decision. Hey, I want to stay put and continue building on his foundation. Had the Oklahoma City Thunder won a championship, or they wouldn't have got to the finals last year, Kevin Durant would be back there. He'd be back in uniform with Oklahoma City. He wouldn't have left. But like I said, listen, Tim and Kobe, and because we're talking about Tim, they're one of a kind. And he did make a lot of sacrifice. I was on the phone with, Vinny Del Negro the other day, and we were talking about Tim Duncan and, some of the sacrifices he made. And one of the things that stood out to Vinny, and I kind of, agree with it, was the fact that he did take less to stay, and he did take less over the course of his career so that the Spurs can be more competitive and stay more competitive. You don't find that nowadays. A lot of guys obviously go out and they're about theirs and they go out and make their money. And even Kevin Durant took less, I know, to go to State. But at the same time, it takes a tremendous amount of sacrifice to do that and to stay in San Antonio. Like I said before, it's not the basketball mecca of the world. You know what I mean? It is as much as the city loves its basketball. Let me tell you something. It ain't a lot to do in San Antonio. Especially for a young guy, a black millionaire making a lot of money. He could have very well bolted to the greener pastures, Hempstead, and Orlando, which is probably a little more vibrant city than San Antonio. But at the same time, it takes that sacrifice to do it, and I think that's why Tim gets the type of praise that he does, because it is hard to stay with one organization when you have so many other things and so many other people that's calling you and pulling at you. And it is so hard to to stay in one city like a San Antonio, where, like I said before, it's not the biggest basketball market. So, I think when we look at those things, we're always going to say, hey, Tim did it. He did it in a great style. He did it in a great manner. Took less, like I said before, to stay. And it's very difficult. It's challenging to do that. And so, and maybe Tim and Kobe, maybe they might be the last to do it. Because, like I said, it's just tough to do stuff like that nowadays, especially when you see teams and players forming their own thing and say, you know what, we're not going to – players are taking their own careers in their hands and say, you know what, we're not going to count on the organization to build and put people around us. We're just going to go ahead and we're going to go out and I'm going to go and win my own championship my own way, like Kevin Durant did. Tim obviously trusts the Spurs to stay put and say, you know what, I'm going to take less. I'm going to trust you guys to put a foundation and a team around me so that I can win and continue to win for multiple years. And the Spurs did that. And so it was kind of like a partnership between those two. And I don't think you see a lot of that nowadays. You may not see it.
So one of the things that I think that has impressed me the most about him, as you said, he remained consistent. He stayed there. He was loyal to that organization, but he was always able to produce. And whether he's being paid $20 million or $5 million, he was always able to produce in his way and whatever the team needed in that specific moment. I looked through some of the career stats and things like that, and I'm not necessarily shocked, because you realize over 19 years what he's able to do. But, this guy, he's fifth in the NBA in blocks. And I don't know if people realize that. Fifth all time in the NBA in blocks, because he was always like 2-point-something, maybe 1.8 here and there. Are there any statistical numbers from that kind of like stand out to you? Like, after 19 years now, do you say, wow, Tim Duncan has accomplished this?
Not really, man. Stats are always going to be there. When you play for as long as Tim Duncan has, stats are going to be, they're going to come, they're going to go. Somebody's going to come in, they're going to, surpass Tim Duncan in one of those categories. It's the way that he did it is the most impressive. You can put up thousands of, I remember I'm from Philly, right? And so one of the things that a lot of people criticize Allen Iverson for the longest time is the fact that he took so many shots. He scored a lot of points, but he took so many shots to do it. So a lot of people may not have appreciated the way Iverson was doing it at the time that he was doing it. Now you look back, you say, man, he was one of the greatest scorers ever, but look at how he did it. He necessarily didn't lead the league in assists, and he didn't always have those great numbers. At times he would take 20, 30-something shots a game, even though the Sixers wanted him to do that, and he had to have him do that. It was the way there was a lot of criticism at that time saying, man, Allen, maybe you should pass the ball more to trust your other teammates around you. And this is when you translate that and you look at a guy like Tim Duncan, who, the way he went about doing and scoring and getting those statistics, it was the fact that he played team basketball to do that. And the numbers just came. I don't think he was keeping track of it. It's like he was just so dominant and it just came. But the way he did it, he played team ball. He sacrificed. It wasn't about me. He took a role, and he took a lesser role when Tony Parker and Manu Ginobili were coming up, and he was still able to produce. So it's just the way he went about doing it, I think, is the most impressive thing, not the statistics themselves.
Jabari Young joining us here on the Baseline NBA podcast, a segment of the breakdown as we're talking about the herald career of Tim Duncan. After 19 seasons, he has decided to call it quits. What is it that I know, Jabari, we're talking about the greatness of Tim Duncan, and I guess my question is, who's the next in line? I feel like this is why we've come to this point. Like we're going to talk about some really great great guards who are going to basically walk away from this game. Some great two guards, great wing players. But is there that next power forward outside of Tim Duncan? And I'm not even talking about Dirk Nowitzki, because he falls in the fold of the same era that Tim Duncan's played in, basically. So who is next in line to really take the mantle, so to speak, and kind of shine a light on what Tim Duncan has done, which is so one of a kind. Seems like it's so once generational. We don't even talk about the power forward position in the same light anymore, like we talk about these other positions, which is interesting as to why we really are marveled at the career that Tim Duncan has had.
Well, if you're talking about who's the next power forward to be the guy in the game, obviously you still got a few of them. And listen, the Spurs still got one themselves in LaMarcus Aldridge. Let's not forget. This man has quietly, had himself a decent career. He may not have those numbers yet that Tim Duncan has, but if you ask players around the league, people who truly respect and know the game, they will be the first to tell you that LaMarcus Aldridge is the best power forward in the NBA as right now. With that said, I think Anthony Davis, obviously, you can't forget him. when you're talking about the best, the up-and-coming power forwards. I think Blake Griffin, even though he's went through his fair share of problems over the last few years, specifically with injuries, I still think he needs that certain amount of respect. It's a shame what's going on with Chris Bosh, because I still think that he could be one of the best as well. But, like I said, I think Anthony Davis is the guy who's going to take that torch and kind of run with it from there. For as far as the elite power forwards, and there's going to be a whole bunch more that's coming up, but he certainly is going to be in the spotlight. But at the same time, still, and like I said, he doesn't get enough credit, But if you really want to look at all around game, at the fact of he can, play that power forward position, not a stretch four. Stretch four is not shooting three, not a stretch four. Taking that power forward position and really taking the torch like how Duncan took it. LaMarcus Aldridge has to be in the mix. I mean, still young, still playing at an elite level, made the All-Star team, for like the third year last year. So, he's still the guy, he's still the best power forward. He's not going to get the accolades. He's not going to be in the spotlight. But if you want to look at his game, the way he plays, the way he can score, he has to have that he has to have that respect of him being a top-tier power forward in the NBA. And I think Anthony Davis is coming right after him.
Okay, definitely can't disagree with you there. Going back to Duncan a little bit here, in terms of, when you look at his overall career, statistics obviously stand out, winning stands out. I think there's a lot of conversation about who he was as a teammate, and there was even, I think, some stories even more recently about how fun he was and, how he really looked out for people. Can you share anything, kind of along those lines that, doesn't necessarily have to do with the statistics and obviously all the greatness and the 5 championships and MVPs and things like that? What he was as a person and, some of like maybe a great story that really helped somebody out.
You know what, man? Tim Duncan and Greg Popovich are like, they're so quiet. They do so much behind the scenes that, you don't even hear about it until maybe like a year or two after it's done. Then people start talking about it. It's like, man, why didn't you tell us then? We wanted to talk about it. But, the help aside, I think Tim's character and his personality was something that I really wished I could see more of. I really wish that he would put it on display more, because he has such a unique character, man. The best conversations I've had with him has nothing to do with basketball, because the man hated talking about basketball. He didn't like it. He wanted to play it, but he got to a point in his career, he just stopped wanting to talk about it so much. And that's why he did less and less media as he got older and more experience in his NBA. And, I remember this past season, I tell people all the time, against New Orleans, he went like reboundless or scoreless, one of the two, first time in his career. And he didn't talk after the game. I saw him, and he put on his earphones. He kind of slid out the back while we were talking to Tony Parker and left his teammates answering that question. We had no idea. Like, it was one of those things you just see the box score, and it's like, wait a minute. He didn't have a rebound. This is the first time ever. And so I see him a couple of days later, and I'm like, yo, dude, you didn't have a rebound that game? He's looking like, oh, well, life goes on. And that's the type of guy he was. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, damn, you don't give a damn that you had this the first time in your career. I thought you'd be like, oh, nah. Instead, and then weeks later, he didn't play in Thanksgiving. We're talking about the turkey that he prepared because he was home on Thanksgiving. Papa gave him a night off. And, he's home, cooking a turkey with his girlfriend and his kids. And, he's more talking about that and detailing that than his actual on-court performance. So, it's rare to find those guys that, allow, that just kind of talk about other things except for basketball. Even though you wanted to talk basketball with him because that was your job to cover the team and, you want to hear because the fans wanted to know. I appreciate those conversations that I did not have that didn't surround basketball, because he just was such a unique guy. And like I said, I'm young, covering the Spurs, only my second year. And technically, as I went away and covered the Portland Trailblazers last season and then came back. So I caught him on the later part of his career, not really when he was in his prime and really more engaging. But even still, over the last few seasons that I've been around him, the guy has been nothing but, respectful. I just wish he would have shown more of the things that you guys were talking about, the things that he did off the court. But instead, he was just, did what he did, donated to what he donated to, and kind of went behind the scenes. And I think one of the things that he kind of made mandatory is that if he did help out, if he did, donate or did anything outside of, basketball, I think he just told people, listen, don't make it public. I don't want people to know about it. I'm doing it because I want to do it. And I think I respect that more.
Yeah, I absolutely do. And I think for our standpoint too, when we've had opportunity to interact with Tim Duncan, it was typically at All-Star games, and that was just a media blitz, and he was not about that life at all. Just didn't want to be bothered in the least bit. And again, he wasn't rude or anything like that, but you could just tell.
It was the stare, man.
It's the stare. There, he's done that. It was over.
I respect Shaw. I respect the stare. Everyone else can sit here and do all of that psychoanalysis type stuff. What goes by? No. When a man gives you the Tim Duncan stare, it's a wrap. Listen, you respect that and you keep it. That's when you know a basketball player. When you can look at his stare, you can tell, what I'm about. Do I really need to be answering questions about this? It's all in the face, man. It's all in the face.
It was cool.
Yeah, him and KG, man, they're two of a kind. Like, even we actually had the NBA, it had to get notified that Tim was actually not talking as much because, the NBA makes it mandatory that certain players have to talk, right? And, if you don't talk a certain amount, then, you go to the NBA and say, hey, this guy's not talking. I really need him on some things. And everybody kind of left Tim alone a little bit to a point where it was like, man, we haven't heard from Tim in like 4 or 5 weeks. Like, come on, you got to talk to him. And we actually had to go to the NBA like, come on, we need to talk to him. And then he finally came out and talked, and then he just left for 3 more weeks and we didn't hear from him. You know what I mean? So it's like, and then the league was even telling us, listen, him and KG are so far gone. I mean, they're just so far gone as far as media. They really don't do too much of it. I mean, they've done and they've put their time in, and now it's just, let them be. And that's, I think that respect was there.
True. And then so before we let you get out of here, and let you go off into your sunset, if you will, when it comes to Tim Duncan, you mentioned David Robinson a little bit earlier. Robinson a little bit more, community oriented, and not necessarily in terms of what he does, but just in terms of being friendly and being engaging, if you will. Do you think we'll see that from Tim at all? Even if he just like gets a year off and then maybe he'll start coming out a little bit more, or do you think, he's just really going to be ghost and we're never really going to see much of this guy at all?
You know what, man? I have a daughter. I have a 2-year-old daughter, right? And from a father's standpoint, I hope he don't. His kids, man. They're older now. I don't think they're approaching their teens, but he has 2. And I tell people this, and I've told them this in all the interviews I did, is that the positive of Tim Duncan leaving the game is that his kids get him back full time now. Not part-time, not, daddy's going to spend a little bit of time with us before he flies out to a game for a couple of weeks or taking a long rodeo trip. His kids get him full-time now, every day of the week. And I think they deserve this time, not anybody that, not the media, not the fans. His kids deserve this time. They deserve all of Tim Duncan that they can possibly get because we've hijacked that man for 19 years, and we've done everything and got a lot out of him. So, if he makes 1 or 2 appearances here and there, which I highly doubt, I'm just going to nod, salute him, and let him be. You know what I mean? Like, it's just his time of just kind of, he's retired, man. This is what you do when you retire. You just living life, and he deserves to do that. He's 19 years, like I said, he's given this sport on a pro level. And then you throw in the other 4 years that he did in college. I mean, it's his time to let him, go spend time with his kids and his family and just live life. And I don't want to be one of those dudes that try to disturb that. Well, I want more of Tim Duncan. Dude, if you haven't had enough of Tim Duncan the last 19 years, then I feel sorry for you. You should get a life. You really should. So I hope he's out of the picture for a while, man. And we may not see this guy until maybe his Hall of Fame speech. And I think that's when you'll appreciate seeing him and talking to him more.
Well said.
Yeah, man. He is a father. He is a sports writer, and he's one of the few people to actually meet the eyes of Tim Duncan and live to tell about it. And he's been on our podcast. He is Jabari Young. Be sure to check him out at Jabari J. Young. He writes for the San Antonio Express News and also My Essay. Jabari, man, we really appreciate you hopping on with us, man, sharing some great stories and reliving and really heralding one of the great players in NBA basketball history. The name Tim Duncan resoundingly will always forever be in our hearts for our generation, but more importantly, for those who don't know who Tim Duncan is, this opportunity that we've had with you, man, I'm sure has definitely enlightened a lot of people on that.
Hey, young brothers, I appreciate it, man. Y'all keep doing y'all thing, and good luck to y'all, and hopefully we'll do this again sometime.
Most definitely. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And this was The Breakdown. Time now for The Drop. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw of the Baseline NBA podcast. And this week we have an excellent guest on with a really great topic. It's probably a topic I know a lot of our colleagues who do podcasts probably have not had an opportunity to touch upon this, but I kind of like this one because I think this one holds closer to my generation and our perceptions of how basketball has influenced art and how basketball also has influenced cartoons and the memes and the things that we're now seeing in this modern day social media that we are now embracing right now. And really a great person who's going to help us kind of tap into that, our man, Jack Perkins. If you don't know who he is, man, he puts together some awesome pieces that you can find. His Twitter handle and Instagram is @PureHoop. Jack, thanks for joining us here this week on The Baseline.
You got it, Cal. Thanks for having me.
And Jack, I applaud Shaw for this one because I think this one kind of gets missed. We are captivated now with the commercialization that we're seeing for basketball players and the way that they are being marketed. But a lot can be said that, basketball, much like the hip hop culture, it's grassroots. And probably some of the most poignant characters that we've seen, the most polarization that we've seen from NBA basketball players has been through art, through painting, through T-shirts, and even through cartoons. And so the first thing I wanted to get from you was what exactly is it that has you still supplanted in wanting to do this? Is this more about the pure aesthetics, about how you see basketball? Or did you find that there's a corner in this market that hasn't really been tapped into that now is allowing to flourish with the type of personalities that we see in today's modern game?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of all of that. These days, with social media and with the personalities and the characters we have in the NBA, and how much it's growing, how fast it's growing, I think it really lends well to what I'm doing and what other basketball artists are doing. But also on the other hand, it's just purely something that I'm entirely passionate about. It's the thing I want to do more than anything else. Been doing it since I was a kid. Started out drawing young, and first thing I wanted to draw was dinosaurs and fire trucks, that sort of stuff. But quickly it became basketball players, and now, it's becoming easier and easier and with social media to connect to other artists. And, it's been good for the whole community of basketball artists.
So when you talk about connecting with other artists, I guess I have kind of a twofold question, if you will. Going back into your early days, who was the first, player that captured your imagination that made you want to, kind of put pen to paper, if you will, for lack of a better phrase, or, paint to brush to paint, right. Thing. And then secondly, how tight is the actual community, when it comes to the other artists out there? Because I think a lot of times it could be very competitive, people hating on each other, but it seems to me that there seems to be a lot of love within the art community, especially those who are doing art and basketball.
Yeah, I don't get a lot of that angle, that the hate, or competitive. It's competitive, but only in a good, kind of like just how competitive it is in the NBA. These guys are all friends, and so it's competitive in that way. And back to your first question, it was definitely Magic for me. I'm 37, so I was probably about 7 or 8 when the Celtics started playing the Lakers all the time in the finals. And strangely, I'm from just outside the Boston area, and my father and my grandfather were pretty diehard Celtics fans. But for some reason, every time they'd have the TV on, they wouldn't watch it all throughout the year, but we'd have it on during the playoffs and the finals a lot. And I was like, man, the Lakers are just so much cooler. And just seeing the Forum and seeing Showtime and seeing the stars, I don't know, I just gravitated to their style of play, and I had the Magic poster up in my room. And I drew all the players, but definitely Magic was first.
Jack Perkins joining us here on The Drop. Jack, I look at some of the pieces that you've done, and some of them are phenomenal. The very first one that really stands out to me was the one you did most recently with regarding to Kobe Bryant playing his final game, and on the 4/13 being the date, and the way that the setup is, you have 413 triangles to pay tribute to Kobe Bryant. And to me, I think part of that is what's being missed, is that while it's great doing something about the players, there is an artistic aesthetic feel to it that if you're someone who can understand how an artist is kind of paying homage in like this particular piece, or in other ways to show something important about what they're taking from a certain time frame in basketball or team like the Golden State Warriors and things of that nature, that you're finding ways to kind of express that through the form of art. And I think it speaks a lot because this is part of that culture crossover that at times gets missed in the perceptions about why NBA just seems to be, one track minded at times. It's only about the players, but things like what you do to me help kind of spread more diversity for people to understand the cultural feel about how basketball has influenced even the artistic community.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I feel the same exact way. That's exactly right. That piece that you're mentioning was actually done by an artist named J.C. Rowe. And that is a big mural that's right down on Melrose Ave in LA right now that I knew about. And I just happened to be in the area grabbing some takeout for my family. And then I was like, I got to make it over there to check this out in person. And it's spectacular. And like you said, just the thought to think about the last date that he played and take that number and turn it into the number of triangles that were incorporated into the piece is fantastic. And yeah, that's always something I try to do too. I'm not just rarely will I just draw a player to draw a player unless, I don't know, commemorating some birthday or something kind of insignificant. But usually if there's an event or a game or a play or something, the narrative and the story behind that player or that event is a big part of the art. And it's the most fun part, actually.
Well, I think that's important too. I think because, that would have kind of even answered part of the question I was going to ask next. Okay, well, how do you specifically choose what you're going to, to portray, what you're going to put on a regular basis? And I think, using iconic moments, if you will, such as that, although that wasn't necessarily your piece, but I think that is always a great way to kind of have inspiration one way or the other. But, you said you've been doing it for a little while now. You have a website as well too. Perusing that, I was looking around. I was like, you have some really great T-shirts and things like that are available. What are some of your, I guess, most best-selling pieces, if you will, that seem to really resonate with some of the fans out there?
It's fluctuated over time. I think when I first started, once I got ramped up, the Fear of the Beard James Harden shirt was definitely the hot seller. But that's tailed off a bit as of late. I don't know if it's because of the play or the style of that team or who knows what, or just, changing in popularity.
Give D'Antoni a little bit of time. I'm sure that'll pick up.
Yeah, I know. I hear you.
Leave it to good old D'Antoni, boy. He's figure out a way. He'll start jumping up the interest real quick.
Oh yeah. So. Going back to that. So yeah, and then what's strange is, or maybe it's not strange, is that some of the pieces that seem to resonate most with the buyers are the retro pieces or the old pieces. Like my Larry Bird shirt just says Legend across the front. It's kind of done in a retro kind of style, kind of faded, and it's got the parquet on the back with his number, and that one just sells great. And I think it's twofold. It's that it's a simpler design. And it's someone iconic and beloved, especially in the Boston area, but all of basketball. Who doesn't love, even me as a Lakers fan, who doesn't love Larry Bird?
Jack Perkins joining us here. Be sure to check him out on Instagram and Twitter @PureHoop. Jack, actually back to that point. I mean, why is that? I feel like, and this is why I was touching on at the very beginning when I introduced you, is that I feel like our generation seems to embrace these type of things a little bit more closely than I'm thinking more the modern generation. I feel like the modern generation is about the jerseys, right? And the whole replica thing. Mm-hmm. I like the originality of, this is what I think of when I think of my special player or my player that I follow. And this is what it's to me. It's more than just if you're like the Boston Celtics. It may not be that you are a Larry Bird fan, or you may even be a Dennis Johnson fan. It may be just that group, back in the 80s that you actually loved. And that's what I love about what you do, is that you kind of encompass more than just one single person that makes it stand out. the idea is that it reminds us so much more about what that time represents rather than the individual. And it's just interesting to me because I feel like we embrace that a whole lot more than I think the modern generation is tending to embrace it. And I don't even fault the NBA more so for that as much as I just look at the way that we're trending in that direction.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think it's kind of exactly what you just said. It's almost a matter of pride. Like it lets people know that we lived through that and that we remember that time and that we loved basketball at that time, even though we love basketball now, obviously. And, you even hear that in a different way, but with some of the ex-players or the commentators, when you always hear like, well, no, the Warriors have never beat the Bulls. It was more physical back then. And, people just, especially people that played at that time or watched at that time, like to let people know that they know it was a different game back then. It was more physical, that they know details about that time period of basketball. So maybe that translates over into wanting to wear that kind of merchandise or buy that kind of art that proves that they remember that time or that time was special to them.
Yeah, nostalgia definitely reigns, I think, when it comes to our generation of the NBA, because I look back at stuff now, and I just saw recently this week, an old Nintendo is going to come out with 30 old games, and I'm hyped up about it. So I definitely feel like when we look at these things, and you talk about some of the players that we saw growing up, in our age bracket, it really does seem to resonate more with us in this generation. But what I wanted to ask you, Jack, is in terms of like collaborations, how often do you get to collaborate with some of the other artists out there? Because you did say that there does seem to be a good feel amongst each other, and obviously you're trying to raise your game to maybe outdo the next guy, but it's nothing malicious. But do you guys get to collaborate at all in any projects?
That hasn't happened too much yet, but the talk about doing it has happened a lot. I guess the tricky thing is sometimes an artist will have an idea and just want to execute that idea or get moving on it without really thinking about the collaboration aspect. But it's definitely been pitched my way a number of times. I've definitely thrown it out there to a few people as well, and it's definitely something I want to do very much, because I think seeing pieces like that, when you see a collaboration, you're getting two unique views or more in the same piece, and it really can heighten the beauty of the piece, really. And I hope to get to do that a lot more going forward.
Jack Perkins joining us here. Be sure to check him on Twitter and Instagram at Pure Hoop. Basketball player, t-shirt maker, just all around. The artistic versatility and his thing is definitely towards the NBA. Jack, a couple more questions before we let you go. And it's more so, I think, a viewpoint of what you see now. With everything that has happened so far in this offseason, the free agency frenzy and the money going up and things of that nature, do you think that that's a good thing, especially for where you are in this industry, and how you as a person is using art as a means for you to profile not just your favorite player, but also certain things that are going on in the NBA? What are your perceptions about what we've seen so far with free agency and the amount of money being thrown out there? And do you think any of that's going to filter in this part of this industry that you're involved in right now to help kind of blossom what you guys have been already doing for so long?
I guess it's hard to say, but you'd have to think it would. And I would say that goes for what you guys are doing too. And basically anybody that has their feelers in the NBA in some regard, the money is crazy, like when you see it, but it's really just raising the NBA and people's awareness, and the finals ratings are higher than they've ever been. And it's not just the money. Like a lot of it has to do with the personalities and the player and the amazing players we have right now. And I guess the accessibility too, like social media is just, put this thing on its head. So I think, I'm excited for it. And I think it certainly could translate and have an effect on what I and all other basketball artists are doing as well, in a positive way.
So how long does it take you in essence with these pieces in general? If you're creating a drawing of some sort, how long does it generally take you? And do you ever get a chance to actually get some of these players to even model for you? Because how are you, is it really just from other pictures that you're creating the images? You're using a still from a TV. Like, how are you actually conceptualizing these things and then putting them, in the art that you're doing?
That would be the goal. That'd be amazing, getting a player to actually model for the exact pose that I'm looking for. I mean, maybe someday.
You could probably get Draymond Green. He's looking for anything positive right now, given the kind of off season he's already had. So
yeah, I know. Dang.
I mean, nobody wants to see him spreading peanut butter and jelly on a sandwich for commercials. So maybe it might be in his best interest to link up with you so we can kind of get some good pieces out there, man.
I'll have to hit him up. Shaw, back to you. I was, yeah, it can be tricky. Sometimes I'll have, I don't know if you've seen the recent ones I've been doing of some of the big four. I guess
yeah, those have been great, man. Really.
Thank you. Those are particularly fun to do, but I'll have an idea of how I want these guys posed, and trying to find a picture of Kevin Durant standing in the way I want with the expression I want is not going to happen. So it's usually combining 3, 4, 5, 6 different photo references, and sometimes it's not even him. Sometimes it's just I'll go and Getty Images or Google or some search engine and look for man standing and just try to find someone with a similar build standing in the pose that I'm looking for. And as far as how long they take, yeah, those are taking quite a lot of time just because of the detail and the number of characters and the color. So something simpler like a quick sketch of a player, that's like an hour or two.
Wow, you're very talented. That's dope. I really like the Boston one you did. Obviously, we're Celtics fans here on this show, so but if you haven't checked him out, make sure you're checking out his Instagram at Pure Hoop, on IG and on the Twitter as well too. I mean, just so many dope things for you to check out, and make sure you're checking out the store. But I'm not going to talk about it. You tell them about it, Jack. Where can they find your work? Before you let you get out of here, where are you found, and where can they buy some stuff?
Thanks, Warren. I'm at Pure Hoop on Twitter, Instagram. And if you want to check out the store, we got prints, shirts. It's purehoop.bigcartel.com, BIGCARTEL.
He is the man, painter, T-shirt maker, and probably is going to be Draymond Green's agent in not too long in the distant future. But actually just an excellent person who puts together some great pieces. And again, on Instagram at Pure Hoop, Twitter at Pure Hoop. Jack, man, we really appreciate you hopping on with us this week, man, and talking some great stuff regarding the NBA and art, and how these two things together continues to ascend the popularity that is the NBA that we follow, man.
All right. Thank you so much, Warren, Cal. And I just want to say thank you to you guys for supporting us artists and what we're doing. It really means a lot. And it encourages us to make even more.
Well, definitely, man. And we hopefully will be able to get you back on here real soon, man, especially as we start coming up on some interesting times for this upcoming season. We definitely would love to get your perspective and hopefully be able to profile a few more of the pieces that you have going out there right now, man. Excellent stuff, bro.
All right. Sounds great. Take care, guys.
Jack.
You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And this was The Drop.
Coast to coast.
Time now to go coast to coast discussing the news in the association. You ready to rock and roll, Mr. Shaw?
Absolutely, man. Let's ride.
All right. Unfortunately, another great in the NBA has passed away. The defensive wall, former center for the Golden State Warriors, Nate Thurman passes away, Shaw. Gone too soon, but man, what a great career he did have in the 14 years that he played in the NBA.
Yeah, pretty much averaged 15 and 15 throughout the course of his years, and been to the All-Star game, I think it was 7 times, and a guy that a lot of people don't know that much about, but was a house. He was a super athlete and a super defender when it came down to things, and a lot of great love out there for Nate Thurman. RIP to his family and obviously to him himself.
Gone too soon at the age of 74. All right, man. And now we're talking about raising some stuff up out of the dead, boy. Leave it to Danny Ainge. The Boston Celtics, they weren't done. Let's just not say that they were trying to leave their mark in getting Al Horford and the draft picks. But there's been trade rumors about the Celtics looking to get Russell Westbrook or possibly Blake Griffin. Boy, Danny Ainge don't play. He's going for big guns.
He absolutely is, and we'll see if these are things that actually come to fruition. A lot of varying reports out there from kind of the backfeeds of Twitter, if you will. Nobody major, if you will, and no offense to anybody that has, made some comments on the reports, but not your typical ESPNs and Yahoos and things like that coming out there saying that. It's just speculation as to what could potentially be, and if the Celtics were able to land Russell Westbrook or Blake Griffin, especially with some of the moves the Clippers have made recently, that would really put them in contention, I think, in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, and a lot of this is obviously riding on the fact that Russell Westbrook, and there's been reports that he has no intention of extending his contract, and that obviously the next move would be for the Oklahoma City Thunder to look into trading Russell Westbrook before he becomes an available free agent at the end of the season. Out in Los Angeles, as we talk about Doc Rivers wielding the magic wand, being the proverbial king of president of basketball operations, so to speak, Raymond Felton and Brandon Bass are now part of the Clipper family. What do we say about Doc, man? Just riling up the gang, boy. Just bring them all back to the house. Try to do it one more time.
Yeah, he does love him some Brandon Bass. Was always a good professional out there in Boston, and Raymond Felton gives them, I guess, the Pablo Prigioni replacement that they need as Pridge went over to Houston. And Felton will, he'll get some minutes there, kind of help Austin Rivers along as a backup point guard too. But Bass, I think, hey, maybe that signifies something else. Maybe Blake may be on the way as the Clippers start to kind of get some more depth in that front court, and Bass definitely helps them in that area.
Pudge and nudge, man. That's going to be the new combo between Felton and Bass. Out in Brooklyn, Randy Foye, he decides to sign up with the Brooklyn Nets, get a little run. Mark's kind of doing his thing. And unbelievable, boy, just when you didn't think Anthony Bennett could find a home in the NBA again, here he finds himself back in Brooklyn. Boy, Brooklyn keeps on taking it.
You ever saw that movie Gladiator, and when Russell Crowe and his compadre, they're on the plank there about to die, and he's like, not yet. That's Anthony Bennett's NBA career. Not yet.
Simply can't get rid of him.
Not yet. He's still hanging around.
Doesn't it? It vexes us. It just truly vexes us.
And the Brooklyn Nets are going to take a shot here again after striking out, if you will, on two unrestricted free agents. Those guys back to respective teams. Colin Johnson, Alan Crabb. Now they, go out there and try to get a guy like Randy Foye and Anthony Bennett. Foye, a veteran who can definitely help them and can score. Bennett, just trying to get his NBA career finally off the ground.
All right, out in Cleveland, the Birdman. He's deciding to fly one more time with King James, especially after that epic run. He wants to try and do it again. He is now with the Cleveland Cavaliers.
LeBron is like a mini Doc Rivers, you know what I mean? He likes his guys. He likes to bring his guys back in the fold. He's had Mike Miller back, had James Jones back. Now he's bringing back Birdman. So, good for him as that team looks to try to repeat and what's going to be a very, very spirited, I think, rematch potentially. Obviously, we're not making predictions just yet, but the Cavaliers are very much expected to make it back to the NBA Finals, and Birdman trying to get on there, and he's definitely ring chasing, bro.
Free Bird just roaming all around, boy. Look out in Cleveland, boy. Cleveland rocks, and the Free Bird, he won't stop. Out in New Orleans, Shaw, finally, Terrence Jones, man, and we've talked highly about Terrence Jones and where his game can truly go in a system that'll allow him to flourish if he's given the opportunity and the minutes. And maybe he's now found that playing in New Orleans. I'm still somewhat scratching my head on it somewhat, but you can't be completely mad at the situation, because if he has to contend with this position with Dante Cunningham, I'm just saying there's a lot of versatility there that Gentry can work with in finding Terrence Jones some play.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they use him. Not too sure that was a fit that I thought he would go to. I thought he might have had a slightly larger market, but apparently I was wrong. Maybe even a team like Brooklyn, who we just talked about, could have really used Terrence Jones' services.
No Thaddeus Young there, right? So
exactly. I think he could have been an easy plug and play for that system there. Or even before Jaron Sullinger ended up signing in Toronto, maybe going to over there to play the power forward position. But either way, he's in New Orleans. The Pelicans will not have Tyreek Evans to begin the season, so they will be relying on some of the young guys out there after losing Eric Gordon and Ryan Anderson. Buddy Hield will be plugged into that lineup. Terrence Jones definitely will give them some depth, at the wing position, and obviously in the front court as well. We'll see what he does out there, man.
Definitely. So really, some already good signings. Obviously, the big names off the board, but we still want to keep you in tune with everything that has so far taken place here when it comes to the free agency, the fat tracker, so to speak, as we say here on the Baseline NBA podcast. What an awesome show this week, Shaw. What more can be said with our guests, Jack Perkins, Jabari Young, two great guys completely in the crux of everything happening, and the coverage that they have basically been able to give us with so much of the range and the topics that we discussed, man. Really an awesome show this week. I am totally stoked.
Yeah, I'm really excited about, this one getting out and everybody giving us their feedback. Jabari was amazing, providing that Spurs insight, and Jack is just a nice guy, humble guy, really into his craft and what he's able to do. So we're so glad that we're able to bring his platform to our listeners, and hope they enjoyed the show.
Most definitely, Shaw. And listen, once again, we encourage everyone to show their love and support for the Baseline NBA podcast. And I believe as well, too, brought to you by Fan Essentials. Shaw, how important is it to get yourself geared up for the Fan Essentials gear, man?
Man, I hope everyone's checking out fanessentials.net. Again, all you got to do is subscribe, pick your team every month to get your team's gear shipped right to your doorstep. Packages starting at $14.99, going up to $34.99. Insert our promo code BASELINE at checkout and get 30% off your first month. So make sure you're going to fanessentials.net and using the promo code BASELINE to get all your hot NBA gear coming straight to your doorstep.
Most definitely. And once again, we'd like to thank you and yours for tuning in, listening to the Baseline NBA podcast. For the Baseline, Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, we appreciate you guys, and we'll catch up with you next time.